Okay.
Great. So Robert, you're gonna walk us through Tinkercad for beginners.
SketchUp.
Or sorry, SketchUp.
I wanted to look at this Tinkercad one too, but I think I had a conflict, so I wasn't able to do that. But, okay, I can do a quick introduction. My name's Rob Coolidge. I'm an architect, and I've been using SketchUp since they introduced the Mac version in, I think, 2003 or 2004 or whatever. I've gradually grown better and better and better at it. And now I've been teaching it to high school students since like 2014, I think was the first year. SketchUp's a great little fun program. It can be fun or it can be really frustrating depending on whether you get its mentality or not. It's relatively as an architect, it's relatively inexpensive to some things out there. Revit or ArchiCAD are in the thousands of dollars to have a seat for. And even the pro version of this, which is, depends on how you buy it. There's a classic license and there's a subscription, but the classic license is something like $800 or whatever. And to a lot of hobbyists or woodworkers, that's a lot of money. There's a subscription for the pro version, I think is $250 a year. And all the objections to, you know, subscription pricing that people like Adobe and everybody are going for has raised a lot of, you know, objections, but that seems to be what everybody's doing. But there are the free, I'll give a quick little history just to understand. When I bought it in 2004 or whatever, one program, you just bought the program. It was, I think, $600, and it came on a DVD. And it was it was introduced, you know, in 2000 or so, and by a company called At Last. And after a few years, it was one of those companies that Google spotted and said, "We're going to buy your company." That was like late 2000s or something. I forget the exact date. But so once Google bought it, their idea was they were going to do something like Wikipedia. They were going to make it free, or at least a version of it free. And they figured the whole world out there would model all the buildings in the world and populate Google Earth for them. It was sort of, you know, getting somebody to do their job for them. So they introduced SketchUp Make, which was free. A slightly crippled version of the regular pro version. And after a few years, so it became known as Google SketchUp, and sometimes people still call it that. But after a few years, Google decided that wasn't working. And they sold off the company to another company called Trimble, and they're the current owners. Trimble has got a lot of CAD software in the civil engineering world. So when they bought it off of Google, it still had this free version called SketchUp Make. And how does a company maintain giving away free software when they're trying to sell software? So something happened about 2017. They decided SketchUp Make 2017 was going to be the last free version of the desktop software. And the desktop software runs in either Windows or Mac OS, and that's it. There's no Unix version of it. So they introduced at that time this free version that runs in a web browser. They said, this is going to be our new free version. And compared to the desktop version, it's very crippled. In particular, it won't run any plugins. But so this is the new reality of what you can do for free with SketchUp. SketchUp here, I can see if I can present.
Yeah.
Now let's do a window. If I can find.
Well, I can share if you want me to present.
I'm looking for this one. Let's try. First, let's do a quick look at this. We'll go to this. Well, this is the training stuff. They have created a learning portal, and Jay, I think you've looked at some of this. It's learn.sketchup.com, and it's got an extensive amount of training videos. It's all based on the desktop version. And I did some math here. There's 2 hours and 40 minutes of just video. And that's not counting sitting there doing some of the exercises. But it's hard to find all of the versions that in their website, but you might want this link. It's sketchup.com/download/all. And that has not only the current versions, but the last 2 versions. So like the current version for desktop is 2020. It has 2019. It has 2018. You need licenses for the pro versions, but that is where you'll find SketchUp Make 2017, which is the last free version of the desktop software. So if you get into this and you start liking it, I'd highly encourage anyone to go download this last free version of Make while it's still available, if you really want to do more with this. So, but for right now, just doing basic stuff in SketchUp can be done with the free version. So let's do it again. It's hard to get it to pop up the right. Here we go. You are presenting. So can I change windows? Stop presenting. Okay, so let's go to find the window with that one. So you should be seeing.
Yeah, and just to be clear, this is entirely in your web browser, so you don't have to download anything.
So this is app.sketchup.com. You launched this in your web browser. So the advantage to this is it'll run in almost anything that runs a web browser. And that includes Chromebooks, or if you're running Linux, you can launch a browser and you can run it. This is the only way you can run SketchUp in Linux or a Chromebook. It doesn't really work on an iPad. You can try it, but it really requires mouse control for the program to work. So let's take a quick look at it. There was also I hope you sent the video that introduced this interface to you, but there's a couple of things across the top because it's in a web browser. You don't have all the usual menu items that a desktop program has, but there's this hamburger icon gives you this home page, and this is the title of the document which you save. This folder is where you create new and do some exporting. There's a paid version of the web program called Shop, and you'll get more features with it, including the ability to export various file formats like DWG and DXF. So in the free version, you have these lock icons and they prompt you, don't you want to upgrade? But one of the things you can do, even with the free version, is to export PNG files and STL files. So you actually can, with this free version, model something and export an STL file in 3D for 3D printing.
Does it allow DXF there, that little side arrow, or does it just
There's
have
a DXF, but
yeah.
it's a paid feature.
Okay. Yeah.
So you'll have to, and Shop is $99 a year, I think, as a subscription.
I have a question.
So it is, I'm trying to remember if SketchUp Make, the desktop version, doesn't even do DWG. You have to have the pro version or Shop.
So maybe we jump into doing some shapes just so yeah.
Okay, so there's a basic tool palette on the left with navigation and creation tools. The top one is a selection tool. If you have any experience with other drawing programs, there's a few things, like Illustrator or something, that the idea of a selection tool, an eraser, a pencil, and a rectangle are pretty much similar, but there's some things to watch for. So this one right here is a pencil, and there's anyone with a little arrow has more things underneath it. So the pencil, for example, has the pencil tool, and it has a freehand tool, which you just sort of drag out and draw a free form. Well, let's take the pencil tool as an example. So you can click, or click and drag. The program tends to like click, click. Get near the origin here. So in SketchUp terminology, we're in a 3D world, and you're looking at the origin here with 3 axes, which you might usually refer to as X, Y, Z. In SketchUp terminology, they're red, green, blue. So you'll see that discussed sometimes in the red direction, in the green direction. That's their terminology for these axes directions. And the solid one is positive. The dotted line is negative in each of those directions. So if we click once to start a line, it starts rubber banding like many other programs. If you get close to one of the axes, you'll see it snap, and it'll be headed in that direction. If I get close to the red direction, I can be off a little bit, and it's staying, right on that red direction or the blue direction. It's constantly trying to help you do what it thinks you're trying to do. So if you're trying to draw in the green direction, it does that. You click a second time, and that creates an end to that endpoint. You can see here as I drag off in this direction, it's thinking you want to go in the red direction, don't you? And it's snapping to it, right? You have to get a bit off the axis for it to not do it. There's a way to force it to do these, and they're done with the arrows. So the right arrow, if I just tap the right arrow, now it's really stuck on the red direction. It forces it to be strictly in the red direction. If I tap the up arrow, it goes up. And it won't do anything else but go vertically as I draw. So for example, I can draw up here. I've now drawn a vertical line. It also does some smart inferencing. If I want to draw a rectangle that lines up with that corner, if I come down and hover the mouse over it, it says, you're looking at this point, aren't you? And as you drag up, it will align with it. Excuse me. If I tap the right arrow, I don't need that. The left arrow is green. And between the two of them, I've just made something that aligns with this point below and is on that axis. And when you complete the last thing, it created a rectangle and closed it in. So SketchUp is a surface modeler in the world of what all of the things in SketchUp consists of basically 2 elements. They're edges and faces. So I'll get the selection tool again. You can click on stuff to select them. So, and when you select it, it becomes highlighted. This is blue. It might be hard to read on your screen with the resolution that we have here. You click on the surface and it gets a speckled fill on it to tell you that that's selected. So what we have here now consists of 4 individual lines and a surface. Once you complete a loop, it figures you wanted to make a face, and it automatically created a face in here, whether that's what you wanted or not. That's what it does. So this is also in SketchUp sort of jargon. What they refer to all of the stuff that makes up a model as geometry, and sometimes they refer to this as raw geometry, meaning they're the individual elements, lines and surfaces. I tend to not use the pen. So let's one more thing about the selection tool. So the selection tool you can click on to pick things. You can do selection rectangles to select stuff. So if you click and drag with the selection tool from the left to the right, it selects whatever falls inside of the fence you're drawing, right? So if I draw a rectangle completely enclosing all of that stuff, it selects all of it, and I can delete it. If you drag from the right to the left, either up or down, it'll select everything that the fence crosses. So all I had to do was sort of cover all that stuff right to left, and it selects everything that's crossed by it. You can also, if you click once on a surface, you get the surface. If you double click on it, it will pick the surface and all of the edges that bound that surface. And if it's three-dimensional, or it has more to it than just one plane, triple click will select everything that touches one another and everything that's contiguous. I'm going to delete that and draw something again. I typically don't use the pencil as much when there's another way to do it. I do more of my drawing with a rectangle or circle tools, a surface tool. So instead of those, 5 clicks it took to draw a rectangle, you can draw a rectangle with just 2. Here, I'll click the first point, and you drag out, and you're seeing the rectangle being dragged out. And the second click, and there's your rectangle. So one of the other things I'll mention while we're looking at this is that everything is a line or a surface, and surfaces have 2 faces to them. There's always a front face and a back face to every surface. So if I can look at this from down below, you can see it's white on the bottom right now, and it has that dark purple. Dark purple is, I'm having trouble with my mouse here. Sorry. I'm having a little bit of trouble with the Wacom tablet. Anyway, when you it doesn't matter at first when you play with it, but when it comes to 3D printing, for example, you have to have all your faces right side out, or the STL file that goes to the printer won't understand it. Because this isn't a solid modeler, it's up to the user to be sure that you got clean solids when you do 3D printing. So that's one of the things that might matter later. But so the thing they patented when they first created this program was the push-pull tool, which is this thing right here. It says push-pull. There's a few other tools under it. But any surface you can see, when you point to it, you can click, and it's a little tough with it. You can click and drag or click to pull it up. And it'll extrude that face perpendicular to the face. And it's the primary tool for creating a lot of solids in this program. So we have a thing here, which, we now have a cubic volume, and you're looking at all the outside faces. You'll notice if I pick one and delete it, the inside of the box is all purple. That's all the back faces. So right now it's correctly oriented. It's actually is a solid volume, and all the faces are right side out. Occasionally you'll see stuff that's backwards, but let's go back again to this rectangle. So one of the other things is probably the key thing to learn, if you learn anything today about SketchUp, is this. This is just a bunch of lines and a surface. If you go to another program, I really have a problem with it here. This is what's happening is I'm having a problem with the use of my Wacom tablet. Anyway, at the rectangle. So in any other program, like CAD program I'm used to drawing, you draw a rectangle, it's a rectangle. You draw, or if you use Adobe Illustrator, for example, you draw another rectangle. They're just 2 things. You can drag them around. So you can, if I do that here in this program, if I go and draw another rectangle around this thing that overlap, you get something like this. And SketchUp, what it's trying to do is help you by doing things automatically. And so if you had, I can, you know, say, okay, I want to move this rectangle. How do I pick it? Well, you can like do a selection rectangle and select this and say, okay, now I'm got, this is, let's find, this is the move tool right here with the little arrows. Let's move it. And it starts doing this. And this is the first thing that drives everybody crazy with this program is like, what's happening, you know? And what it is when you're working with raw geometry, anytime a line crosses another line, it automatically breaks them all for you, thinking you wanted to do that, whether you wanted to or not. The one lesson you must learn about SketchUp is that actually the onus is on you to make things into separate things. You have to make groups. Everything you do must be part of a group or component in the end. Otherwise, you end up with a giant gluey mess of everything stuck together because of this automatic feature. So let's undo this for a second. Best way I select a surface and all its edges, you double click or triple click. I double clicked on it and I've selected everything, right? If you right click or control click, you get pop-up menus. So with this, we go find make group, right? This item right here. Once you've done that, this thing is now a group. If I use the move tool, it moves about. If I go and I draw another rectangle over here, let me take the selection tool. I'm going to double click on this and do the same thing. Go control, make group. That one's a group. Now I get the move tool. Oops, the move tool. Now they're two separate things. They're not interacting with each other. I can pick this one and move it, and so on. So if you learn one thing today, that's the thing that must be learned about SketchUp, or it will make you crazy. Everything you do has to be part of a group or a component, or it just becomes a group, a total mess. Let's delete that. So, and then once you have a group,
so Robert,
it. Yes.
There's a couple of questions in the queue, and I just thought maybe it'd be a good time to ask those questions quick.
Yeah, I see them flash by, and I'm too busy to be able to read them. So
yeah, no, exactly. Well, I didn't want to interrupt you while you were in the flow. I wanted to wait for a breakpoint. So one was just asking about if you can turn off that automatic feature.
The way it cuts things.
That mode. That's just the way it is.
Turn that off. And that's what, so this is what I'm saying is you have to get into the mentality of this program and go with the flow, or you'll feel like you're beating your head against the wall. You can't turn that off. So you have to get in this habit of constantly making groups of everything you do. And it really is kind of a discipline of thinking, well, what part of the model am I making now? And you make it a group and you're working on that part. And then you go, now I got to make another part. So what part is that? Once you've made a group, it's doing it on me again. I cannot. I didn't cover. I didn't go over a bunch of the navigation things, and I am struggling with one interface thing. Finding your way around. It's all typically based on a 3-button wheel mouse. The left click does most of the stuff you do from left clicking. The wheel in the middle does zooming. I use my touchpad for this, but and it's not working. How about that? Oh, there it is. Wherever you point the cursor and then use the wheel on the middle wheel on the mouse, it will zoom in or out on the cursor. If I point at her, it'll zoom in and out of there, or it'll zoom in and out of here. When you put mouse down on the wheel in the middle, you get the orbit tool. which allows you to orbit. And I am having some struggles at times with, because I'm using a Wacom tablet, I have some substitutes for that, and it's not working all the time. But and then right-clicking produces a whole lot of menus that do important things. The middle wheel and mouse down gives you the pan tool. That's what it is. And how I'm stuck.
So Julia just said that
Okay.
that feature where it's dividing was driving her crazy. So you're her savior for figuring that out.
Yes.
And you may have answered this because she asked it earlier, but it was whether the faces are really their own unique entity. So I guess, can you change the properties of them? Or are there anything else about the fact that each plane has two sides that we need to know?
You can. There's if we get up into so once I've created a group, the way it's now this object, and I can't. You can stretch it with you can scale it or whatever. But to do anything elemental with it, you have to double click on it to enter the group. So if you double click on a group, you get it. The rest of the model is ghosted. You get a bounding box around the object. And now you have access to the individual elements. So here is a face, and let's see if I can get. I'm so used to the desktop version, I struggle with the web one. Where is material? So this one here is materials, and there's also the top one is entity info. Unfortunately, the web version, you'll see for materials, it says material, and this says back material. So there are two different properties. There's a color to the front face, and there's a color to the back face. And one of the bizarre things you can do with this is make the back face transparent, and you can make an object inside out. So it's a classic thing for designing and modeling an interior space like a room. To make the room a box, turn it inside out and make all the back faces transparent, and you can stand outside the room from any point of view and be looking into it. The web-based version doesn't show you what this is. What those colors are. I don't know why. The desktop one does, but if you get here, let me close this out. So we have entity info here telling us something about this. For example, it tells us the square footage and stuff. And the materials thing has colors. If you pick a color, it's automatically switched to the bucket tool, which is a tool here on the palette. But this is how you paint. So I've painted it that color. And that color is not the same as the back face color. They're two separate things. The default material has a way of, once it's in a group, you can have various groups or components and then paint them from the outside, and the default material takes on a color for just that instance. So it's actually it actually works like a variable color, but that's kind of an obscure thing to deal with. Mostly you just paint objects. There are other colors and textures which can be based on photographs. I mean, you can use a photograph of a wood grain, for example, and it becomes a repeating tile. And so there's either solid colors like this one I've chosen, and I'm not sure there's a good. Again, I'm more used to the desktop program, so I'm a little bit.
Julia was asking if the transparency option was only available in the desktop, or if you know if it's in the web version.
It should be in here. Let's see. Let's do. Again, it's just that I'm more used to the desktop version. There's something called metal. Glass. These are groups. Okay, so under glass and mirrors is some presets for, I think this one's gray glass. And we can see our, here it is, making me crazy again. You can see through this.
And so we've got some folks writing and asking if they missed where the dimensioning was.
Okay, so I haven't done anything accurately yet. I've just been rubber banding stuff. So let me make this go away. So while you are, I am having interface problems here. If I'm stuck, I can always use my trackpad. So let me delete this and start drawing. Let's draw a rectangle again. So as you're drawing, if you look in the lower right-hand corner, there's a little white box. It says dimensions. They call it the VCB, variable control box or something like that. And it's another quirky thing about this program, the way it works. So as I'm just freehanding, you'll see numbers there. And it's reading out. I mean, it's a real world dimension. And yes, there is orthographic views. But so while you're rubber banding, it has a readout of what those numbers are, but you can draw to a specific dimension. So if I wanted to make an 8 by 16 foot platform, what you do is as you're drawing, you can stop and take your hand off the mouse. And if you're using a Wacom tablet, that's a problem, but I'll come back to that in a minute. Because you can't hold the mouse. If you touch this, it will change the numbers. If you take your hand off the mouse, it stops and you can start typing. Now with almost any other program, any other interface anywhere with boxes to enter numbers, you're used to using a tab key. You usually like enter a number in one field and hit the tab key to go to the next field, etc. It's so universal, it's tempted to do that. And you could hit the tab key, but they tell you don't hit the tab key. All you have to do is start typing. So I'm going to type the number 8, and the apostrophe is feet, and a quote is inches, at least in the English system here. So I've just typed 8 feet. That's one dimension. And believe it or not, you actually have to type an ASCII comma character to separate the two dimensions. So I just typed a comma. And I'm going to type 16 feet. So it's 16 apostrophe and then return. And I just made a rectangle that's 8 feet by 16 feet. And there should be a dimensioning tool, which is here. And I'll click on one corner and the next corner, next corner, and drag it out. And there it says 16 feet.
Can we modify, if we click on the dimension tool, can we change it after the fact easily?
You can change it. It's not done that way. So if I want this, it's like, oh, I want this to be 12 feet, not 16. What I do, the way I do that is you pick the end line, and I'm going to take the move tool. I'm going to click on one corner and start dragging it this way. Now I can move it all over the place, but I'll do it on the green axis. I'll stop drawing, and so I put 4 feet, return, and I moved the end line by 4 feet. And you can see the dimension string automatically revised itself. It's associated with it, but you can't change that parametrically. In the Pro version, there is the ability to create dynamic components, and I haven't even mastered that yet, but you can find some in the 3D warehouse where people have pre-created them. So for example, the company that makes craft-made cabinets has put up like most of their line as parametric objects. So I can place a cabinet, a 30-inch sink base, and say, no, I want it to be 36 inches. And there's a pull-down menu to say 36-inch versus 30, and it does it. But you can't do that. You can't create those things in the free version here in the web. One of the other quirky things that you can do with the way their numbering system works is you can do it after the fact. I can click and click. I don't know what that number is, right? But after having completed the process, before I've done anything else, I can type 8 feet, comma 16 feet. Oops, I think I got 16 inches. And it'll revise it after the fact. And that's the only way I live with a Wacom tablet drawing by dimensions, because I can do it after the fact. The problem with their method is that as you're drawing, they want you to stop drawing and start typing. With a Wacom tablet, the cursor won't stay still until you pull the pen totally away from the tablet. Now it's staying still. Now you can type numbers, but it's a pain. It's because the whole program was designed around the use of a 3-button mouse that their technique works so well. But it is a quirk that's very weird about this program compared to just about any other. But once you get it, it's okay. There's also probably a useful thing to know about that is the move tool. So I just showed you how I moved a line, and it revised the geometry by doing that. You can move and let's make something like it. I'll do the
yeah, I was gonna say it would be good to get like a 3-dimensional shape that we do a cutout, like maybe like a joint or something.
Right. Let's do
and then I had a couple other questions. One was about snapping into Ortho View.
Okay, so there are if you go into the right side with these selections, there is scenes or views. Let's see. This one here, let me get rid of the other ones. So it's more prompt. So this thing right here has some preset views. So you can get, if you just click on them, you get top view, you get a 3/4 view, and so on in the front view. All this time we're in perspective. So this is a perspective view. It has a horizon line and vanishing points. In this palette, there's 2 things here. The top one is perspective, and the bottom one is ortho. So you can toggle back and forth between the perspective view and orthographic view. So if you do orthographic and the top view, there's an orthographic plan view of what we're looking at. Or just in one click, it turns into a perspective view. So when it eventually comes to making plans, sections, elevations, and the like, you end up using these orthographic views to do it with. Or even, this is orthographic isometric drawing. Let's see. So let's make, here we go again. It's making me crazy. I don't know why it does it sometimes and sometimes not. So let's do, you take the push-pull tool and make this into something. You can have, here's the fun you can do. You can do, you can cut, you can draw on the surface like this. Now it's automatically cut. So there's an intersection here, it automatically cut. So you can see that that's a surface and that's a surface, it's a separate entity. And you hit the push-pull again, and you can make these shapes and you can push them about.
And with those shapes, once selected, is dimensioning done the same way? I see it shifting along the bottom.
If I had dimension strings attached to them, they should still here. it should still work. By the way, you can't see what I'm doing with my keyboard, but there are keyboard shortcuts for a lot of these things, and after a while you get used to using them instead of running over to the palette and fetching them. So yeah, you can see it's changing the dimension that's associated with it as you manipulate it. So typically, so if I want this to be a group or object, I triple click on it and it selects everything and go make group. So now this thing is a group. If there's to be, oh, here we go again, making me crazy. The move tool will move an object like this, and you can do that numerically. So you start moving and stop and type a number like 8 feet, and it'll move it by that amount. If you, here, let's zoom out. If you, on a Mac, it's Option key. If you tap the Option key while you're using the Move tool, it moves a copy of it, not just moving it. So I've now replicated it and clicked once. So there's a copy that's moved a certain distance. If you then, before you do anything else, go 3x, it'll make 3 copies of it. Like, and in a similar way, if you take the Move tool, come on, you hit Option key, drag it out some distance, click, and then go 3 divide, it equally spaces them from the first one to the last one. And you can play in their sort of retroactive method of doing numerical stuff. You can say, I don't like that. How about 4? I can type 4 divide, and I can still mess with it, or 5 divide, and see how that looks.
So, Rob, Julia's wondering if you were trying to make the indent shape, how you would set the depth that you make that indent so it's specific. Okay. And then she's also having trouble with a bounding box appearing around a new shape and not knowing how to deselect it.
Bounding box. Okay, so when you this thing is a group if it's been grouped. If you double click it, I've entered the group and it shows a kind of bounding box around it. If it looks like this, that's an indication that you have entered that group to edit its individual parts. And groups and components can be nested, just so you know. You can enter this group and you can have groups inside of that, and there can be groups inside of that. And typically a complex SketchUp model will have great depth of this stuff. But once you're done editing a group, if I go outside this bounding box and click somewhere else, it'll complete the process of editing that group, and we've exited the group. A key, here it goes again. The key, one of the misconceptions with about using SketchUp, if you've done other programs before, is layers. That there are layers which are now in 2020 being called tags instead. But if you import something from another CAD program that had layers, the layers will come in here. But in other CAD programs, like my 2D program, layers is a major way of organizing your model. All layers do in SketchUp is control the visibility. So if you want to see something at one time and not at another, you put it on a layer so you can turn the thing on and off so you don't have to see it. So I can put her on a layer and then turn off that layer, and you won't have to see her in another particular view, for example. The way SketchUp models are really best organized is by these groups and components, and they can be nested. So that the real organization to a SketchUp model is kind of a tree structure, just like the tree structure for the directories to your computer. You know, you have the root volume, which has things within, folders within it, and there are folders within that, and so on. And there's a way to view it. It's called an outliner. But the outliner doesn't come with the free version of the web. It's included in the, it probably is included with the shop, the paid version shop, and it's probably, and it's certainly part of the desktop version. So I can't really show you with this free version how to view and organize a model of nested components and whatnot. But let's get back to this push-pull and manipulating this thing. So that if you, the various push-pull things, if I can push-pull that, click, click doesn't work too well on a Wacom tablet. It's click and drag. Here's inferencing happening again. So as I push this thing up and down, if I hover over this adjacent surface, it says you want to align it with that. This is inferencing, so it has perfectly aligned it, and I can erase these lines and restore it back to what it was. Let's draw a rectangle on the end here like this. Now the lines don't cross other lines, but it still created two different surfaces. It really did break this. It broke the surface. You can, delete that surface and you have a box with a hole in it. You can, if you want to make something solid, you can take the push-pull tool. Again, I have to drag. You can push in an indent like this. You could, if you take it and drag it all the way through to the other side, and I'm not able to orbit at the same time. Here, hold on. If I drag it through to the other side and inference that back corner, it'll go exactly to that back face, and it's made a hole through it. So you can not only shave pieces off, you can punch holes in things. Here's one little tip when it comes to making holes in things, however. We'll make whoops, you know what? We're still inside the, let's make something new. If you, let's push-pull, let's make a thin thing. And then other things are, come on, let's get those are arcs. Circle. You can make a hole through this. And it's like Swiss cheese. If you try to take this hole and make copies of it, you're left with still a surface, and there's some work to turn it back into a hole again. But I'm going all the way back to our original surface. If I draw my hole first and punch that out, now if I do move like this and go have a whole bunch of holes, if I push-pull it afterwards, now I've got all the holes. So there's a little bit of planning in an exercise like that. If you make the holes first and extrude it, you're done in one click. If you made the volume first and then tried to punch holes in it, it's a bit more work, at least without plugins.
So Rob, Paul was curious how you would deal with circulating or circular shapes, like for example, making an archway. And Julia didn't quite catch how you did the duplication along that line. So if you could just kind of recap what you did to duplicate those holes, and then kind of talk about how you might approach like an archway.
Okay. Yeah, so there's a couple of good things here. The move tool is really useful. I use it a bunch, and it can work in multiple ways. It can work in a verb-noun way or a noun-verb way. So right now, nothing is selected. Is this a group? It's not a group. So you can pick the tool first, the move tool, and it starts hunting for what to move. So right as you hover over stuff, you'll see it light up, like this line. Right now, it's lit up the line. If I click there and start dragging, I move it. So that's, what do you call it, verb noun. You go move and then say this, right? More often than not, I use it the other way, noun verb. It's like, take the selection tool and say, pick this. So if something's already selected, then pick the move tool and then say, and then move it. The advantage to that, one of the advantages to doing noun verb is that you don't have to point to the thing in order to move it. So for example, if I want to move this surface by the length of this edge of that object over there, I've pre-selected it, right? I can go over here, do my first click on this corner and drag to this corner. And I've moved this face by exactly 16 feet, the distance of that edge over there. So I've used up to 2 other reference points to do that move. That's something I do quite commonly. The other thing perhaps was so that's what I think I was doing with when I made these holes, was that I picked one hole and then I dragged along that edge to make sure that I was making these holes all parallel to that edge. So that's part of the advantage of pre-selecting something and then doing move. There's one.
So I didn't quite. So you selected it, and then you did move, and the move duplicated it. Can you maybe walk through it just more slowly? And
yep. Let me recreate this. Where's my rectangle tool? So I'm not used to the web program. So here's a rectangle. Let's just make another rectangular hole. And I'll zoom in here and punch that out. So I want to select the hole, right? One way to do it is left to right bounding box around it. The blue has it all selected, right? Now I want to move it. If I just pick the move tool, you can click on it and move it. Or what I was doing was I'm going to go over here somewhere on this edge. I click on the corner point, and you can see as I move my cursor along this line, it's saying, you want to snap to this line? I say yes, as long as I stick pretty close to it. You can see if I get a little ways away from it, it loses the snap. Right now it's moving it. If I wanted to make a copy, you hit Option key on the Mac. I think it's Control on the PC. So now the original is still there, and I'm moving a copy. For replicate, I can move it, one spacing and click, and there's the first copy. And before you do anything else, say 12. I've typed the number 12 and then X, and it'll repeat it 12 times. So, oh, that wasn't quite enough. I can go 13X, return 14X. There, you've done another one. And because I was drawing along, the original was drawn by dragging out along that edge, this path of movement is parallel to that edge. How are we doing on time?
Yeah, we're actually coming up on the hour.
Yeah.
So we should probably think about how we have a natural, close to the formal session.
Yeah.
And then you can always, if you have the time, stick around after and answer some questions that are more detailed, more casually.
Right.
We still had the question about an archway. I don't know if you have the time to put that in, or if you have some other points you wanted people to get within the hour.
I guess it is valuable to say a few things, particularly about circles and arcs. One of the complaints that you may hear about SketchUp is that they're not real circles, that they're all polygons. And it's true that the representation, I'm trying to find, here's the circle tool. It's true that the representation, when you look at it, it's all faceted. It does, when you first draw an arc or a circle, here we go again. You can choose the number of sides that are used to represent a circle, and you can edit it. At some point, as you start working on a model and you cut this thing up and whatever, it'll lose the information that this was a circle or an arc, and you can't readjust, you know, such a property as the radius or whatnot. It will show up if you 3D print. It'll come through with all these facets, and you'll have a faceted object. So the way to get smoother stuff with 3D prints is to dial up the number of sides that go to it. If you want to, I'm not sure about an archway, whether it's probably valuable to talk about. The follow me tool is used to extrude stuff. And where is it on here? And it is kind of SketchUp's solution to, wait, I'm not used to the web interface. It's this tool. This is the follow me tool. It uses something as a path. So if I were to take, let's take this. I'm going to rotate it. No, it's not the right keystroke. Rotate it. It knows where the center. I'm going to draw off in this direction and make a copy. So if I take this circle and, or actually, if I take this circle, but it doesn't matter, as a path, and say, where'd it go again? Where is here? Follow me. So I've lost my selection. Select face to extrude. I'm going to use this face. Sorry. The way to do revolved objects is to use the follow me with a circle. So this tool, no. So I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm better with the desk-based version than this. But if you want to, I mean, I can make a globe out of this. You want to make a wine bottle, or if you want to make a turned spindle or something, you take a profile of what that shape is, and you use a circle for the path for follow me, and it will revolve at 360 degrees into a turned shape. And you can extrude, that you can do otherwise straight extrusions or whatnot. I'm sorry that I am struggling somewhat with this version of the program because it's not what I use on a daily basis. I have some typical takeaways for what you need to sort of learn first of all. And as I said, the main one is that everything you do in SketchUp has to be part of a group or component, or it'll drive you crazy. And there's some quirks about the program's interface, particularly how you enter numbers, that's a little different from other programs. But if you get with the if you figure that out and get used to it, it's not a real problem. It can be weird that you can type in the numbers after you've done a move or something like that. But those are two of the key things. And if you start playing with this and think you kind of like this, I do kind of encourage people to go fetch a copy of the desktop version, this last free version, Desktop Make 2017, and download it while they're still, you know, making it available. Because there's so much more you can do with the desktop version. In particular, you get into the desktop versions will run plugins, and it's like the difference between an iPhone and an iPhone that can run apps. There's things that do Clothworks and Bezier. If you want to draw Bezier curves, you can do that with plugins and so on and so on. So, I mean, it's a huge marketplace of people developing plugins for the desktop version. But the rudimentary stuff, like you've seen me do here, just making lines and surfaces and circles and volumes and the push-pull tool, all that sort of basic modeling stuff, it can be done right here in the web-based version. So you've had a better eye on the chat comment, so I
yeah. Well, so I think so. I was asking folks, just because you had a lot to cover, I was asking folks to type in the questions. Yeah. But I think now that we've finished our formal session and it looks like a couple of people have dropped out, it's probably a good time for folks to ask verbal questions for, you know, while you have time. Okay. So if they can type in and I'll ask them, or they can unmute and ask a question.
Okay, I have a quick question.
Sure.
So very early in the presentation, you got to where you can name the file that you're working on, and then you said you can save it.
Yeah.
So the question I'm going to ask is, it should be obvious that I know the answer, but I don't. And the other thing, I'm thinking that these other online web-based systems, I would ask the same question there. So when you save the file, is it saving it on the cloud, or is it saving it on your device?
Okay, so when you're here and you just use the save command, it's saved in the cloud. It has some ability to keep unsaved stuff, but I wouldn't rely on it. People have lost a lot of work that way. But you'll see, like when I launched it today, it came back and said, you have an unsaved model. Do you want to open it? It was what I had yesterday. But I wouldn't rely on it if it's for anything important. So when you do save it, in order to launch this program, you have to log into something like your Google ID. So it's somehow associated in the cloud. You can create a Trimble ID and log in that way. You can use Google as your login. But in some way or another, when you launch this program, I believe you have to log in some way. But so this save is in the cloud. There is this thing here where it says download. When you click that, it gives you version options. How about that? That's nice. Every year the program comes out, the file format is specific to that year. Every version of SketchUp will open every previous year, but not future versions. So if you're trying to save this so you can open it up in SketchUp Make 2017, for example, you would have to click 2017. Otherwise, you won't be able to open it.
And where's it downloading to?
So this will download it to your computer, and it should. So it then presents me with a Save As dialog box, and I'll pick what folder it will go into on my Mac.
Okay.
So for example, that's a way to now take what I've created, save it as 2017 onto my computer here, and now I can open it with, say, SketchUp Make 2017.
And if you do save it in the cloud, you have a certain amount of space here where you can come back and work on any one of those files anytime you want. If you're working from the web-based system.
Yeah, I guess I don't know real details about what you have. I would assume if you're using a Trimble ID, there's whatever their deal is. If you're logged in with Google, I guess it's related to whatever you have with your Google account. I don't know for sure.
Okay, and so I guess we have to just do some online testing ourselves and find out how it works.
Yeah.
It's just an area that you haven't been recently.
Yeah,
so.
I haven't spent there. 2
Okay.
years ago, I used there's a version of this program which works in which is distributed to schools, and I've used that 2 years ago to teach my high school students. We did a whole project in it. So at the time I was doing it, I had I was somewhat familiar with it, but it's now I'm real rusty. I haven't.
I do understand that. I've got to do a lot of catching up on a lot of things here too, as well. A lot of new software coming my way these days. But anyway, thank you so much, and let me let you get back to your normal routine, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Were there any other questions? So Julia did ask if there were. She might have some additional questions.
Okay.
And if we had volunteers or facilitators started to bring that along, I think Colin might, we might have some other folks familiar with SketchUp, but
I'm willing to do more with it. I was, you came to me, and frankly, I had been on my mind to offer to do this, before this whole lockdown. I was thinking of being able to do one in this MakeHaven space, but this is what we have to do now. But as time goes on, I'm willing to do more, and could do more of a formal presentation or whatever.
Cool. I mean, that sounds great. And maybe we chat about doing like a specific object or specific shape build. Might be a way to also appeal to a specific audience. So something in the woodworking, building a little table, modeling a little table. Yeah, could be something that would be applicable and interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Actually, the reason that I was trying to learn the program to begin with was to build plans for a gaming table. Okay. So woodworking specifically would be my outlet of choice, I guess.
Yeah. It's really popular with a lot of woodworkers. One of the people I met at the last convention is a guy named Dave Richards, who is a regular contributor to Fine Woodworking magazine. It's published in Newtown, Connecticut, but he lives in Minnesota. But for years, he's been almost every month, he's a contributor to the magazine. And he's an absolute master at SketchUp, and particularly woodworking stuff, how to make dovetails and stuff like that in SketchUp. But another really good learning resource is the SketchUp Forums. If you have questions, you can go there, and people, there's so many knowledgeable people that can answer questions. There's another site called Sketchucation, which also has a forum. I haven't been on that as much, but they are also a source for plugins, which of course you need the desktop version for. But
sure.
And then there's that learning portal that the company created, which has actually got quite good set of lessons to it. What else? So yes, woodworking is quite a popular thing. One of the things I've wanted to do was that one of the sessions I attended at that last convention was a guy who has a plug-in for driving CNC machines for.
That was literally going to be my next question.
So he has a plug-in. I went to his session, and he polled us and said, "What do you guys have?" And I showed him a picture of the big table, whatever that machine is we have in the wood shop. I said, I don't know what this is, but this is what we've." So that was informative, and I haven't had time. That's one of the things it's on my agenda for. I'd like to learn how to do this, but he had some interesting observations. But he has a specific piece of software that goes into taking your SketchUp model and sending it to that CNC machine, particularly for milling everything out of sheet plywood.
Got it.
So
it's like running a model through a slicer for 3D printing.
Yeah, he got into things like tolerancing for the parts so that they would fit, and even out of Cludge, where it's like you take a model and that was designed perfectly, and you scale it up like 2%, and that just added enough slop to everything that it would then fit together without it being too tight to have to hammer it together too hard or whatever. But so that's been on my agenda too. I've wanted to do something with it, but
Paul mentions that his motivation was also to create woodworking plans.
Yeah.
In particular, calculate materials.
Right.
So you'd be interested in that follow-up woodworking-oriented build.
Yeah, there's a frequent question on the forum about cut lists and stuff like that, and there are some plugins that do cut lists, and then there's one guy who has a not cheap plugin for SketchUp that's a complete cabinet building application. So you design your cabinet work in SketchUp, and it will then turn it into all the parts and figure out the most efficient way to lay them out on a sheet of plywood to manufacture, and then drive a CNC machine to make them. And I've only looked at it. I haven't used it myself, but it's incredible what a flourishing world of plugins, the plugin world for SketchUp.
That would be something truly, truly amazing.
Yeah.
And so does the best fit. It finds out how to place all the parts on like a 4x8 sheet.
Yeah, exactly.
And that big cutter can go and cut them all out, and then they're all going to line up.
Yeah.
And then you
clever.
Drill out all the
many of
little
them as you want.
pig holes and the dados needed and all that stuff. And
that's the dream.
yeah. But it's a professional piece of software, and it's not cheap. I think it's hundreds of dollars or something for it. But yeah, and then stuff that Dave Richards has shown is, he constantly is producing those woodworking plans for Fine Woodworking magazine. Whenever you open a magazine and go, here's this month's project, and there's the drawings for it. I mean, I think a lot of it's coming from him. All done in SketchUp, but yeah, we could do something like that. Do we have a?
Yeah, were there other questions from the group?
Who's left?
Looks like we're pretty good. When you were trying to do the archway and you're having trouble,
yeah,
was that the selection tool or the Wacom tablet, or I just wasn't sure?
I keep having troubles with the orbit, using the button on my Wacom tablet to do orbit. Like right now it's fine, but every now and then it gets stuck and it won't let go. And it's some interaction between, well, I won't call it, but there's a control panel for the Wacom tablet, and you assign keystrokes to the buttons that are on the pen. So I've used that control panel to set up a conversion of the button on the pen to be the equivalent of the middle wheel mouse button on the mouse.
So, but we at home can follow what you were trying to do, and should be able to extrude with the mouse, and you just can't represent it on the web version. Okay. Well, I'll try that, because I think that's something I want to try. I'll try that at home.
Yeah. So, one other frustration you can run into, especially when you're doing those extrusions that trying to make a spinned object or something, is SketchUp has built into it something that won't let you make little teeny tiny bits that are too small, like less than a 1/16 of an inch or whatever. So occasionally you'll have problems where you'll try to turn an object and it's got little tiny holes in it where the little faces were too small. And I think it's just to try and keep the user from making unmanageably small things, because it was originally created for architects. So that guy, Dave Richards, he came up with a solution. What he says is you draw your stuff like 10 or 100 times the size it actually is. And then SketchUp lets you make those tiny faces, and then you scale it back down again by that factor. And on the forums, that's become known as the Dave method because of him. But and you can do that with. I didn't show the difference between groups and components. A component is something where it's just like a group, but when you edit the original or you edit any one copy of them, they all get changed.
Ah, that was going to be one of my questions actually that we didn't get to. Okay,
Yeah.
so it'll scale every single one of those if you've duplicated them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
If you change the color of something, it'll be changed in every one of them. If you stretch it or something, every one of them gets edited. So that's the difference between a group and a component. Each group is unique. A component is a repeated thing. And you can store and keep libraries of components. That's a useful thing ultimately.
Is that only in the paid version or in the free version as well?
I think you can, even in the free version, you can get access to 3D Warehouse and download other people's stuff, or you can, I'm not sure where on the free web version, where you save your components.
Hey, a quick question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
All right, so you got an X, Y, and Z plane that you're drawing in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that you were using feet and inches.
Mm-hmm.
I'm making an assumption you can switch that over to centimeters, meters, or millimeters, right? And so, and then is that, and then you could turn on the snap to grid or get free range, so you can set it to anything. You can do that too.
Yeah, you can.
So when you render,
there's a choice when you. I was just trying to.
When you first come in, it said, well, how do you want to design? You might even have to go back to the.
Okay.
I thought when you said new, it asked you what template you wanted. It just made one without me asking me. I thought you generally have the choice of whether it's feet and inches or millimeters, which template you use. The other thing is that's useful is it'll do the math for you. So no matter which template you're in. So if you're in, it's like for cabinet making, it's actually useful. If you're making imperial cabinets and you have a 30-inch cabinet and you want to drill a hole in the side for German hinges, and they're I forget what they are, 30 millimeters or something. You simply type 30 mm in that box, and it'll do it. It'll create a 30 millimeter thing.
Do those settings have anything to do when, like on a 3D printer, the granularity of its fine measurements, are they affected at all by the setup you use initially, the granularity of, your measurement system?
I don't think so. I mean, I believe they use floating point numbers for all the math in this. There is something called length snapping, and some people say never use that. I forget that I have it on all the time on the desktop, and I haven't gotten into that. But that changes. That's not a physical grid that you snap to. It's just a sort of length snapping as you draw stuff. You can draw a grid. At least the desktop version gives you the ability. Maybe it's a plugin that gives you the ability to draw a grid that you can snap to the grid. But I've seen someone else who loves to do that. I never do that. But yeah. So no matter what you pick as your template, if you pick a feet and inches, when you pick feet and inches as a template, it assumes inches. So if you just type 30 return, it assumes inches. If you pick millimeters for your template, it assumes millimeters. So you can just write 300 return, it'll be 300 millimeters. In any one of those, if you type the actual units afterwards, it'll accept, imperial ones will accept metric and vice versa. If you're just specific. So feet and inches, you have to, it'll assume inches unless you type feet. So that's, you saw me made the mistake. I forgot the character and I got 16 inches instead of feet.
Well, thank you for addressing that question. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems like we've come to we've gone through the questions.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay.